Another question that Michael asked about the podcast Kirk Bowman and I did on value pricing, and software development is the following. Michael asked, what kind of results can you put in your proposals in a way that lets you put your guarantee under it and be 99% sure you'll hit the results that you specify? In other words, what he's asking is, how can you be 99% certain that the results in the proposal are something you can actually accomplish? So I want to talk a little bit about that. To understand what results you can actually accomplish, first it's important to understand what is your customer hiring you for. What's the relationship that they're looking for? How are you positioning yourself to help your customer? Now, in the traditional model of software development, that positioning was often about how you can help them achieve a set of specifications or build software that looks a certain way. Oftentimes entailed in like a huge RFP that lists hundreds or thousands of specifications for how the software should work. So in that case, the customer isn't looking for somebody to help them with results. They're looking for somebody to essentially implement the specifications that they've created. So essentially they're looking, if you're outside of their organization, they're just looking for a contractor, an external contractor, to do what they've already figured out they need to do. If, however, you and your customer are looking for a relationship where your customer would like somebody to help them take their desired outcome, the results, and distill that into a plan of action to build software and everything around it that's necessary to achieve the desired results, then that's a different story. You're coming in more as a consultant, somebody that's an expert in delivering results. It's important to understand where you are at in that dichotomy, because if the customer isn't willing to talk about results and let you decide how the software is specified, if you will, then it's a different approach and there are different results that you would put in place. And I would go so far as to say that trying to do any type of fixed bid up front on a set of specifications for what software looks like is going to lead to disaster. I mean, we have a history of what waterfall development looks like, and that's what that is. However, specifying and committing to results up front is a completely different story. And in the process of specifying results, you oftentimes have a measure, and Michael alluded to that in subsequent questions, which we'll get to in a minute. But you oftentimes have to have a way to measure when you're actually done. When have you obtained the results, or when are you on a path to obtaining the results such that you know that your work is complete? So outlining that in your proposal is helpful as well, to be somewhat certain that you can achieve the desired results. And having a mutual understanding of those measures with your customer is important. In fact, the measure should come from your customer and not from you. And the measure is also, like the result, not about what the software looks like. The software is a means to get to the end result that you're trying to measure. So don't use the software as a measurement. Don't measure like the number of features or the number of, in the agile world, the number of stories you've accomplished. None of that tells you if you've actually got to a desired end state, a desired result. I like to kind of think about what you're measuring as first understanding the results in terms of it being a destination of where you're going. If you know where you're going, then you can measure how far along you are to getting there. Along with knowing what you're going to measure to know when you get there, you should also know who is going to be doing the measurement. That'll help you be certain that you can guarantee your work. I think you should be a part of that always, but also somebody at your customer has to be a part of that. And you should spell that out up front and how often it will be done, how often measurements will be taken. Another important thing to understand is what is not guaranteeable. So you're putting a guarantee in there of something, but what's not guaranteeable is that the customer just decides they don't want to do this anymore for whatever reason. Or the customer's just unhappy for something that's their own fault, or for whatever reason. It has nothing to do with your performance in delivering the desired results. What you're guaranteeing is that if the customer does their part and you do your part, that things will be successful. So don't put a guarantee in there that's just a blank slate for the customer just to decide they don't want to do things anymore. Though if you really discuss the value, that shouldn't be a problem, because they should still see that value and not want to miss out on it. It's important that the customer articulates the results as well. So even though you are committing to delivering those results, your customer needs to be the one that spells those out. It needs to be from their own mouth. You shouldn't add your own results, because what's important to you, what's valuable to you, is not necessarily valuable to your customer. You should, though, be able to restate what they've said are the desired results in a way that makes it clear to you that you understand what's going on, and back to them that you've understood what they've said. And only after that would you take those results, put them in a proposal, and slap a guarantee under it. When you are looking for things that you might want to measure to determine if you're getting to determine probably more than anything that you are on the right path to achieving the desired results, I would recommend looking at judgments as opposed to measurements, because measurements can oftentimes be misleading. And measurements are often looking at things that are simple and aren't as substantial as you're probably looking for in the desired results. In other words, it's easy to measure like the time we save, but the time we save in doing something is probably not nearly as significant as understanding when you've boosted employee morale, or you've made your customers happier, or which leads to loyal customers. You can't measure those things. Those are fuzzy, but you could apply some judgment to those things. So look for opportunities for judgment. Of course, that entails trust. Don't use fuzzy levels of judgment if you don't have a good relationship and trust built with the person that is going to judge things on the side of your customer. However, if you have a good partnership there, then I would recommend looking at judgment and make yourself a part of that and somebody at your customer's organization a part of that. You together will decide, and either of you can say yes or no. We need to do more, or we've done enough. Both parties should be a part of that decision. As to who should be involved on your customer side, well, it probably should either be the buyer or it should be somebody that they trust and that will hold themselves accountable to the same expectations as outlined in your proposal, the same expectations being the same results. If you want to be certain about achieving the desired results, then the results should be similar enough to work you've done in the past that they aren't a huge risk for you. That doesn't mean that there isn't risk involved. In fact, I encourage for there to be risk because that's what leads to your own growth. But it should be something that's like a step away from where you are right now, not a leap across the room. Now, whether or not that's a step or a leap, that's a gut feeling type thing. If you feel really uncertain about the results, that's probably a leap, but you'll have to use your own judgment in that case. I also like to think of, what's the worst can happen? Ask yourself that in terms of being certain about the results. If everything blows up, ask yourself, will you still be able to put food on the table? Because if you're taking reasonable risks and everything goes wrong, the worst you can do is learn from things, as so long as you don't actually starve. In terms of software development, a recommendation, the results and the measurements, everything entailed in being successful, the duration of the project should be more like 3 months, not like a year. So don't commit to lengths of projects or projects that have a seeming duration of a really long period of time. Give yourself a shorter timeline to be successful. If you feel like it's going to take a year, that's probably an indication you should scale things back. It also gives yourself a chance by setting a smaller duration to get out of things if things do go wrong, right? So if it's a 3-month duration project roughly, you're going to find out much sooner that you aren't able to deliver the desired results for whatever reason, whatever may go wrong, than if you're in a project that's about a year long and might take 9 months to get to that same understanding. I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Results shouldn't entail what the software looks like. They're never about the deliverables of the software. And that's because what the software looks like has no indication of the results that it's going to help the organization accomplish. What the software looks like has nothing to do with how it's going to improve the lives of employees, customers, or your customer. So your customer's customers, your customer, their employees. It's not going to talk results, like the software itself won't tell you anything about that. That said, as you get started with this approach of focusing on value and value pricing, after you've outlined the results and how to measure success in terms of being done, and you understand the value, after you've done all of that, you're going to present options for how you can tackle that particular result, that particular outcome. In the options, when you first start out, go ahead on a very high level, specify some of what the software looks like if that makes you feel comfortable. Just realize though, if the software doesn't end up looking like that, that you still may need to change it to look like something else that will help achieve the desired result. So as you're starting out, go ahead. Just be open to the fact that we know historically that fixing the scope up front is nothing but disaster. Put some scope in there if it helps you or your customer get on board with the project as an initial path, if you will. Just be willing to adjust that path as you go. Again, the result, the destination is where you're going. Don't get fixated on a particular path. When you start out with the project too, and before you actually sign off on a proposal with a guarantee in it, outline the assumptions and the risks that are involved. Make those very clear from both sides. You should be able to bring these to the table. Your customer should be able to bring these to the table. Put them out there and allocate the risks and assumptions or the risks behind assumptions. Allocate the risks based on who's best capable of dealing with it, whether that's you or someone in your customer's organization. And then if there's anything left that neither of you feel comfortable tackling, put it out there and ask yourself, is doing this project still worthwhile? If it is, it's out there. Everybody knows about it. When it comes up, if it comes up, you both know that you'll be able to work together to deal with it. Also realize that when you are approaching projects with the perspective of results, you're making an investment. You're not just being productive and producing software. You're making an investment to achieve results or get on the path to a set of results. You're making that investment with your customer. You're never going to be 99% certain. But what you should be 99% certain about is that you don't screw up and that you're not negligent in doing your part to achieve the desired results. So what you decide up front is your responsibility. You shouldn't be negligent about. And that's why it's a good idea to have a guarantee so the customer knows they can fall back on that. Because why not? I mean, unless you plan to be negligent, why wouldn't you guarantee that you're going to do your part? Michael also asked, what if there are factors contributing to the results that are not under your control? What I would say is not everything's going to be under your control. You're partnering with your customer in an investment. What would be wise is to know that the results are under your collective control. Between you and your customer, you should have control of things. And specifically, the people within your customer's organization and your organization that are involved should have control. If someone above you in your organization, or more importantly, somebody above the people in your customer's organization that you're working with, right? So you're working with certain people in your customer's organization. If people above them or lateral to them that aren't involved control factors, you've got a problem. So you've got to make sure that you are in the appropriate level with your customer's organization, that they can control the things they need to control to be successful. And likewise, that you can control the things that you need to be successful. Michael also asked, do you usually measure the results in units like hours saved, new customers acquired, etc., or more like employees are able to do X with an effort no more than Y per week while processing Z number of widgets more than before? All right, I see two things going on here that I would like to talk about. First of which is new customers acquired and measuring that. I think that's a fantastic thing to at least discuss up front, because that leads to a discussion about why the project would be worthwhile. But I would be hesitant to say that you're going to tie your guarantee to the number of customers acquired. That's more contingent pricing than value pricing. And that's a whole other world of risk for you. You're taking probably the same level of risk on that your customer is, because you're both actually on the hook for the same level of success. Aside from discussing all of the nuances of contingent pricing, value pricing is a little different. Talking about customers acquired is a great way to talk about the value of the project and what it may be worth to your customer. But I wouldn't necessarily tie it specifically with a measure that you're actually going to help them acquire 5,000 new customers or you don't get paid, for example. The second thing in here that I wanted to address was the part that was hinting at measuring time saved, perhaps. I kind of see that as generally measuring efficiency improvements. I think that it's possible that the project's impetus could simply be for efficiency's sake. And if that's the case, go for it. If the value is huge in terms of the time saved, great. But I'd also caution that that typically is what people think a project is about, when in reality, or it's typically what people try to make projects about, but in reality, the amount you can save is often abysmally small compared to what you can gain by making improvements. If your conversations typically always revolve around efficiency, and that's probably because people tend to think software only exists to expedite existing processes, then you probably should find ways to talk about other things that are potentially valuable. For example, asking a simple question like, what is going to be done with this time saved? Because if people are just going to sit around with the saved time, why is it worth doing then? That can open up the door to perhaps something else that is really at the heart of the matter and is really the result that's desired. I like to think of this as like efficiency. So we have something that costs $5 already. If you look at how much you can decrease $5, well, you can only reduce it by $5. You're never going to have 100% reduction in the cost to do something. You might be able to get like 5 or 10% efficiency boost, like in a great ideal situation. On the flip side, though, if we look at what can we gain instead, well, the sky's the limit, right? If we're making improvements to something that exists already, we could make $100,000. But if we're just trying to save $5, there's not much room to actually make a difference there, if you will. So don't focus so much on efficiency as just don't let the conversation revolve entirely around efficiency. And I know that that'll come up because then that's also easy to measure. You can talk about ideally how much work will be saved, but in reality, that's not what's important most of the time. Though if that seems to be the constant discussion coming up from the customer, that's fine. Have the value conversation around efficiency. Go ahead and quantify what that would be worth. What you're probably going to come up with is like you do the math and all of a sudden you're going to save one person 10 hours a week for a year, and you're going to be like, well, that's only worth like $5,000 in that person's salary, right? Assuming you can put that person to valuable work for that $5,000 of their salary saved. Nonetheless, like the work it's going to entail in terms of software development, can you really do anything for $5,000 of custom software development? Probably not. So just by having that efficiency conversation, quantifying the value based on efficiency, you should be able to circle back and say this project isn't worthwhile if efficiency is the only impetus for doing it. And that's probably not the case, so you'll be able to then talk about the things that do make it worthwhile. And it's very possible, if that was the only impetus, that you can help your customer identify that the project isn't worthwhile and something else is more important to focus on. You just have to stop. We have to stop thinking about software as replacing people or speeding up the work people can do. Software should enable people to do new things, because that enablement is what leads to potentially improvement. But it's not just about saving somebody's time. People aren't factories that just need to be sped up. Focus on how you're going to help your customer do new things, do the right thing. Those are going to lead to substantial improvements, not just figuring out a way to do the same thing faster than before. Now, with that said, commenting on the two things you mentioned, which were new customers acquired and efficiency or time saving, what I would like to say is what you can measure that will help you with understanding a result that you can commit to is that measurements should somewhat be predictive, right? So what is a predictive measurement? Well, predictive measurements are things that would predict your future success. So the measurement may predict that the customer will achieve the desired result. For example, your customer may come to you and theorize that happy customers will help refer new customers. And then you can talk about how many they think under a given situation. You wouldn't necessarily commit to how many, but by backing down then from happy customers refer new customers, you can say, well, what makes customers unhappy? Well, one thing that makes them unhappy is that orders that aren't delivered on time is probably an indicator that those customers are unhappy, and then they're not referring new customers. Well, then you could ask yourself, well, what causes the majority of deliveries to be delayed or late? And perhaps that's, and also your customer probably should have already come up with that, but the customer probably comes to you and says, you know what, 5% of late deliveries are directly related to X. So X is your like hitting X is kind of your predictive indicator that you're going to have happier customers that are going to refer new customers that are going to bring new revenue and hopefully profits into the organization. So you can focus on X though, and if X is something you can mitigate with software, then that's what you may commit to. For example, if you could detect X within the time frame with software to be able to allow people to correct for it, then that's your result. That's your measure. The time frame that you have to detect it within is a measure of what may predict the success of all the way up the chain growing customer base, but more importantly, delivering orders on time, which may be kind of the objective, if you will. The fuzzy objective of this project is improving delivery accuracy, and how you're going to do it by detecting X, which causes 5% of late deliveries within a time frame to correct for it. So that's something then, if you can look at X and go, in your gut say, yeah, that's something I can commit, I can guarantee I can do my part to deliver the results on, then that's how you can be more like 99% certain when you're putting that satisfaction guarantee in there.